the People by People podcast with me, your host, Laura Sutherland. I am back and I'm sorry for leaving you for a couple of extra weeks, but I'm hoping that you will understand why. I have been busy, and also I'm hoping that you will find this podcast episode super informative and exciting, and it will have you running about, going away and taking action and thinking about what you do in your role more. Because I'm delighted to welcome the well-known brown bear himself, also known as John Brown, who's CEO of Don't Cry Wolf. Welcome to the podcast, John.
Thanks very, very much for having me. Delighted to be speaking to you.
And so to give the listeners a bit of perspective, John is the chair of a group that I'm involved in called the PRCA's Misinformation and Climate Strategy Group. And we formed, when did we form?
I think it was just earlier this year. We sort of got together in January, didn't we, really?
Yes.
A lot has happened, I think, since then. So I'm pleased with how far we've got.
Do you want to give a little bit of perspective about what we're doing then? Because some people might not actually know about it.
Yeah, sure. So, this group was set up to try and help really in three specific areas with comms professionals. I think the first and foremost was to provide a kind of a bed of knowledge and to help comms professionals kind of upskill their own understanding of the climate crisis, the involvement of different industries in it, even the terminology. So I think number one, it was sort of, let's see how we can kind of upskill all of our understanding. So we're going beyond sort of superficial knowledge of climate change and the issues involved and into something a little bit more in depth. I think the second part was, how can we raise up and bring to life some of the really, really important work that we're all doing to solve, or to at least to try and address some of these key issues, which might not necessarily be the sexiest work, but it could be some of the most important work. So give a place for a real celebration of in-depth, useful campaigns and activity that is genuinely, we believe, sort of moving the needle a touch when we're looking at this topic. I guess the final bit in this, and we're not a kind of police person for the industry at all, but we do want to make sure that best practice is kind of followed. So it's developing some best practice guides for any comms professionals looking to engage in this discussion, and I guess importantly, calling bullshit where we see it as well.
Yeah, important, that one. And I suppose as well, one of the things that we quite often say in public relations is you don't know what you need to know. So I suppose a good place for everyone to start is to ask themselves the question, do they understand what climate change is? Do they understand the implications for them and for their families, and, you know, from a personal perspective? And then look at it from a business or organizational perspective. You know, what does that mean for clients? What does it mean for if you work in-house for your organization? And what does that also relate back to in terms of like values and purpose? Yeah. Because you know, the whole greenwashing thing is something we hear a lot about. And I don't really want to talk about greenwashing because it's not particularly proactive in terms of, you know, giving people a heads up on how they should be or could be doing things. But certainly, you know, kind of looking at what organisations or what PR people have been talking about to date hasn't been of particularly great quality, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I would. And actually, you know, we can kind of almost remove the sort of the personal opinions from this a touch, because you know, one of the things that, as you know, Laura, we commissioned some research quite early on to understand, you know, what are people's fears and thoughts when it comes to engaging the climate in the climate change or climate crisis discussion. And we looked at that from both a professional's perspective, so PR professionals, as well as the general public. And what became evident is that there's a sense of nervousness. I think it was something around sort of 70% of PR professionals highlighted they're actually nervous about engaging in the debate because of a lack of expertise. So, and yet a lot of them, I think, you know, the amount of PR professionals who are being asked to provide advice, consultancy, insight into the idea of how an organization or a brand or an individual can get involved in the climate change debate and discussion and movement, that's become exponential rise in that. People are being asked more every day to provide an opinion, insight, or an idea around that. So we've got this kind of desire from businesses, agencies, organizations to get PRs involved in this discussion, and a real undercurrent of nervousness around, do I really have the expertise and skills to actually contribute effectively in this? And I think we have to kind of plug that gap, because it is actually now probably more dangerous to take a heap of action with a very superficial knowledge than it is to keep quiet for a moment, understand the debate more intently, to really sort of upskill and up-level your knowledge, and then contribute something to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of like opening, what is it? It's the saying, opening your mouth and letting your belly rumble.
That's it.
Maybe that's a Scottish thing.
Yeah. Well, my belly's rumbling all the time, but that's a totally different.
But certainly from, and just to clarify, I think this is a thing that kind of comes up when we're talking about this. We're not saying that as public relations practitioners, communicators, that we should be advising on climate change. What we're saying is that from a public relations relationship perspective, value, purpose, and purpose, that is why we should be getting involved in the conversation and advising on it. It's not advising, yes, you should be cutting your manufacturing process by doing this. Just to be clear, that is not what we're saying. What we're saying is that as people that have a responsibility for organizational reputation and relationships with stakeholders, which essentially are people on the planet, we need to be part of this conversation and advising on what we should be doing from a doing good perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it definitely, it's not to try and sort of elevate PRs to the sort of position where they're climate scientists. Although I hasten to add, I'm an environment and conservation biologist by education, so there's a little bit of something which I can at least contribute to there. But putting that hugely egotistical statement to one side for a moment, what we're trying to avoid, and I think it's probably best summarized as a sort of a real practical example. What we're trying to avoid, and what we're trying to give people the ability to engage in, is when you have a blustering CMO turn up to that PR meeting and say, well, we've just found this great offset scheme where we're going to completely eradicate all of the emissions of our business, and it's only going to cost us £1 extra per customer, and we need to do a huge news announcement of that, and we think that we're going to be net zero by 2026 as a result of this. It is our role is to provide enough information, enough insight, that the PR doesn't immediately go off and create a campaign around that, but spends at least a fraction of a second critically analysing those claims and working out whether they are A, credible, B, feasible.
And I think that's, again, coming back to that part, the strategic part of what we do, and it's having all the facts, it's having that data, and it's trying to understand and have that critical thinking. So we're not saying send in a junior account executive to go and write a press release about it. We're saying let's put this into perspective and really start to understand our roles and responsibilities. Which kind of comes nicely on to a couple of things. So I've alluded in the past in podcasts to the Mercer report, which is about people, risk and business opportunity. And interestingly, before we came on to record, I had a quick look. As in the UK's kind of index, it's ranked number 8 as an environmental concern for UK people risk. But it doesn't appear on the global scale. Which means, well, it signifies potentially that what people's feelings are and nervousness around environmental impact, whereas actually the UK has it, and it's between 1 and 10, so it's ranked number 8. I think that's a good thing that it's on people's radars, but it's then what people actually do with that. And
Yeah.
what we as a group are doing for the industry is our target audience, is looking to educate, and then for them to take action, and then to look at what the impact can be on a wider scale. Do you want to talk a little bit about the education aspect of it? Because I think it has to be number one on our priority list.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, it is coming down to the fact that if there is one thing that I would hope we are able to achieve as a group, but as an industry, is that we just accelerate our intake of knowledge and understanding around climate change and climate crisis, and then organizations' involvement with it. And education as part of that is absolutely critical. And I mean that from a sense of, you know, if you are putting forward a net zero commitment on behalf of an organization, do you genuinely understand what that means? Do you know what a science-based target is? Are you comfortable with talking about combined carbon emissions and what that actually means, and the tonnage and the kilogram weights, and what that, you know, it sounds nitty-gritty, but if you don't have if you're not cognizant of that sort of understanding, then it can get quite dangerously out of hand the further you go up the chain. So it's important to at least ground yourself in a level of strong knowledge on the fundamentals of what we're actually discussing and what we're actually talking about, and what certain terminology and approaches and technology means within this debate, so that you can then at least apply a layer of critical thought and analysis when you're faced with the opportunity to either sort of develop some comms around it, or to advise back to your stakeholders as to how to approach the situation. And I think that for us is absolutely critical. And our work is not, you know, John Brown and Laura Sutherland telling people this is what this all means. It's actually trying to find organizations and individuals whose day job it is to understand these the fundamentals of this, and to actually work with us to provide our industry with insight, education, to allow us to kind of upskill in that. And that takes place across all other industries as well. It's not a sort of unusual thing to bring in the actual experts who are dealing with this on a day-by-day basis to help give us a perspective and an understanding that will allow us to do our jobs better. I think it's absolutely critical that we do this.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. And what I touch on quite a lot is collaboration. Like the collaborative approach to, in fact, Scotland is probably the best case study for Scotland's 2020 climate group when I was working with them, delivering on all their communication and PR stuff. Like our collaborative approach between business and industry and government, local government, public third sector, it just meant that everybody was working together, and that there was all different aspects from, I suppose, a diverse look at a country, which is essential because it's representation then. But I think from our perspective, it's really, really important that this isn't seen as another initiative for another initiative's sake. There are enough initiatives out there from organizations, from businesses. This is not an initiative for the sake of it. This is an initiative for actual intent and action, and to achieve something. And I think that the way we've gone about the collaborative stuff. So, before, I think people probably have seen the event we did for the PRC's international conference, and we had on there the Met Office, who was obviously providing some seriously good information there, and that is science-based. And Dave from there was really kind of making it rather clear that we need to be dealing with science-based fact and data, and not just a whim or whatever we discover ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think this is an important thing to sort of state, because there's sometimes an expectation that we are going to produce some sort of, industry charter, or the PR's guide to reducing your carbon emissions, or how an agency can get to net zero. That is not what we're going to produce. And the reason why we're not going to produce it is because there are organizations far smarter than us, than this working group, that have already produced that stuff, and that have already created all of the necessary documentation and guides and information to allow people to go and do this themselves. So adding another layer and saying, "Oh, this is the PR's version of this," was frankly superficial and a waste of time. It's important, however, that people within our industry know where to go to find this content, that they have access to it, and they are given the signposts towards that information and that guidance. What we desperately mustn't do is to try and rewrite something just to, for the sake of sort of prestige, and because PR needs its own version of a science-based target. We absolutely do not. There is enough out there. We have all of the tools, technology, and information in our hands at this very moment to address climate change. It's just about finding it, extracting the stuff that is meaningful and evidence-based, and then applying that to your own organization.
As John has eloquently described in other meetings, our runway to COP, we will be holding a series of sort of bite-sized events, which will be part of the education side of what we're doing, and also hopefully with one of our partners. And information will be on the website soon, but also PRCA members will, or their entire database will get information through about these events. So if you've not signed up to PRCA, then go and do that just now so that you can get that there, and also follow us all, and obviously I'll put this all in the show notes, John, PRCA, etc. as well, because it'll be on socials when we have more information on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, what we wanted to try and do was essentially give people a really strong primer in the run up to COP, so that they could effectively understand and contribute to the discussions, decisions taking place at COP, hopefully meaningful ones. And we wanted to just lay a path of clarity and understanding, so that by the time it really hots up, there is a sense that we're kind of prepared for the discussions that are taking place, and to actually get a good primer. So we're going to be looking at anything from trying to unpick some of the terminology and decipher what some of that means and why it's important. Right the way through to getting some of the broader themes of COP, such as biodiversity and resilience, for example, to the key themes that are going to be discussed there, and really trying to look at what the key trends are within that, and what we think will be the key discussion points during COP26. So these events will be bite-sized, very much kind of hopefully easily absorbed, rooted in evidence and in information, and there to help people navigate the discussion in November.
We're all about action and having a positive impact. That's the whole point of this. There's obviously concern, even the Mercer report, people are saying that it's a concern to them. On a scale of 1 to 10, they've chosen it as number 8, that an environment is a concern to them. Individuals, let's say, setting their own actions, let's not beat about the bush. Is that going to be quick enough for us to achieve what we're supposed to as a country, or as the world? Is that going to be good enough, or are we hoping that bigger and speedier things can be done to make sure that we achieve what we need to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's defining what a personal action is. I think we have to move beyond this. We've become slightly obsessed with our own individual carbon footprint. And to be perfectly frank, that's simply because we've had it shoved down our throat by those organizations who want to distract away from their own carbon footprint, who want you to believe that it's your carbon footprint causing this crisis and not something else. We have to move away from, the idea that because you've switched your toothbrush from a plastic one to a bamboo one, the job's done. Yes, they are, there's small positive changes that we can all make as individuals, but the most important action for an individual to undertake, if we are to say that this is such a crucial time in this whole situation, the most crucial action they can take is to properly inform themselves about it, and then B, find the systemic change that they believe in that has to absolutely occur and fight for it. Fight for that systemic change. We are not going to save this planet through bamboo coffee cups. It's just not going to happen. We have to have a wholesale collective movement towards a different way of existing. And that means economic, it means from a consumer perspective, it means from an energy perspective, from a production perspective, all of those things. So number one, inform yourself. And number two, look for that sort of systemic change that needs to occur and fight for it. But number three, and this is where it gets interesting, I think, certainly from what I've been recently writing about, yes, there's that systemic change that I would encourage everyone to sort of investigate and to fight for. But if you then individualize that to something that is present, that is right now, and actually focus that attention on, and it could be something as small as sort of fighting for a particular species to not go extinct, but something that's meaningful right now, today, I think you then get the motivation to really, really put that effort in. So we do need to switch from this idea that we're doing something that's going to affect our grandchildren or their children. And actually, what we're seeing the effects of climate change right now, across the world, we're seeing the effects of climate change. So we have to be much more present in the action that we're taking.
When Kevin Mattei spoke at PR Fest and he talked about sort of smaller but more incremental changes leading to something bigger rather than just giant leaps, people making a difference and organisations making a difference that way. What do you think about setting goals, for the future, or is it just about the here and the now?
Honestly, my problem right now is future gazing, because I think it becomes almost too imaginative, and you're trying to put investment and emotion behind something that happens in, we talk about 10 years time, 20 years time, 2050, 2060, it all becomes too big and too ethereal. And I've got a friend down in Cornwall who's an ecologist by trade, beautiful man, lovely guy. He really cares about migratory bird species. That's what he really genuinely cares about. He is a enthusiastic bird watcher. So he invests his energy into making sure that Cornwall and the local migratory bird population goes one way, and that's up, increases. And it has been going down for many years, with a significant, about 50% decline. Now, he doesn't really care, in inverted commas, whether or not that is contributing to fighting the climate crisis, but he is wrapping up a passion point in something that is affecting him today. And that means that his action, his intent, and his emotion is much more present. And I think one of the things that we've got to change, or from a language perspective, from a comms perspective, is we've done a really good job, or the IPCC report certainly did a really good job of highlighting that actually we're in trouble right now. And we are really in trouble right now, and that there is that we are experiencing the deep effects of climate change at this very day. So we're experiencing the negatives. Yet still, it feels as though the action is surrounded by something that's going to take place in 10, 20 years' time, something that might happen in the future. Now, and I wrote this in a recent piece, I don't love my grandchildren because I don't have any. So I can't possibly love them right now. So I can't be motivated to save them at this point in time. But what I can be motivated for is to ensure that my kids today are able to enjoy and see and experience some of the things that I was very privileged to see and experience. And if that means a sort of a patch of nature, a sort of a wild environment, species that I was lucky enough to see and photograph in my travels, and I want them to have that today, then that present motivation is much, much, much more powerful than trying to think of some ethereal future where I'm holding my grandchild and saying sorry. And I think that is what has to change from a language perspective. So back to your original question, what are the things that people can do action-wise? Number one, get yourself informed. If you don't understand it, understand it. It's crucial that you have more than a superficial knowledge of this. Number two, look for systemic change and don't beat yourself up because you're still using a plastic toothbrush. Really, this has to kind of look at what needs to change systemically and get informed around that as well. And then number three, root your action and your emotion and your love and your passion and your focus on something that's happening today, something that is present. Don't just think of some ethereal future, root it in present.
And that's what drives motivation, doesn't it? Because it's
Absolutely.
a personal approach, then the motivation's there to push on and affect change. And some really great points, very, very well made. And I think one of the problems we have sometimes is that when we talk about climate change, there are so many people talking about it in different ways, and so many you must do this and you must do that. But I think just to always be simple in the approach that we take and be very clear about what it is that we're saying. And again, not reinventing the wheel, because there are other people that have done the research, that have gone out there and written the papers, and they have
it's all out there.
The data. Yeah. I think, again, just to reinforce, like the purpose of this group is to help our industry to recognise and be educated enough to be the strategic advisors that we should be in this case. And also, if we're not doing that, then we're not in the role that we should be in, essentially.
Absolutely. And it's dangerous. I can't stress that enough. It is, we do not have the time to be distracted by campaigns and comms that aren't rooted in evidence and information and have a strong understanding of this. We just don't have the time to be distracted with that type of nonsense. So, it's not just a sort of, we'll just put it out there. It's like, do not create noise when actually the real focus now needs to be on the stuff that actually is genuinely going to matter and genuinely going to change. So that's I suppose that's the grand responsibility in all of this. We're not rewriting the rule book. We're not trying to release all our own versions of policies. All of the stuff exists out there. And in fact, that would be a distraction as well if we were trying to rewrite stuff and come up with our own jazz hands around all of this. No, the stuff's out there. Get informed about that. Hopefully this group will point people towards that information and level up in that way. But the responsibility we all have is to not contribute to distractions, because we just don't have the time for that right now.
That just rounds it off. It just says it all nicely. As always, it's amazing to talk about this with you. I think that the work that we're doing is exciting, but also inspirational. And I hope that when other people see what's coming, we've taken quite a while to get to where we are, but we've made some really good progress. And again, probably, we've not sent out press releases every week to tell people on our progress, because you know what, we've been busy actually doing shit and getting stuff done. And we're not distracting you.
We don't need another press release, and we don't need another fanfare.
If you are someone that's interested in supporting what we're doing, contributing to the Knowledge Hub, then please do get in touch with us. We're always delighted to hear from people who want to advance what we're trying to do. But thank you so much for your time. I know you're extremely busy, man.
Thanks very much for having me, Laura. Really, really appreciate it. And it was great talking to you.
So there's yet another episode of the People by People podcast where we delve into some quite serious conversations around our industry, what we should be doing in terms of educating ourselves, and what's available through the work that we're doing with the PRCA and the Misinformation and Climate Strategy Group. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. If you have any comments, if you have any thoughts, if you want to get involved, if you want to contribute to the hub that we're developing, then please do get in touch with John. You can get in touch with me, PRCA directly. I'll put all details in the show notes. But also please consider sharing this podcast episode, because when you share it, it helps other people to be more informed as well, whether they agree or disagree with certain elements or opinions is neither here nor there, because what we're actually doing is not trying to have an argument about climate change. It's actually about presenting the right information, detail, fact, and data to allow people to make their own decisions and to allow them to make good business decisions as well. So thanks so much for tuning in again. The People by People podcast will be back very soon, probably with another solo episode, because I've got a lot to talk about, as always. But please do share, leave a review, and do not forget to subscribe to the podcast, because it means that whenever I record a new one and it's uploaded, it will go straight to your app and you'll hopefully get a wee notification about it. Thanks again. I'll speak to you soon.